guys, wanted to make a quick video, and I thought I would continue on with the tradition of making a low quality video in my car. So I wanted to talk about interstitial cystitis, and this video isn't necessarily directed towards you guys that are vegan and super dialed in on the plant-based lifestyle and all that jazz, but it's hopefully some people that are suffering from interstitial cystitis, interstitial cystitis may come across this and find some answers. Side note, so if you don't know what it is or you've never heard of it, my understanding of it is that it's a somewhat mysterious condition of the bladder, and it is pretty tricky to diagnose. There's not a lot of effective treatments for it. There's none as far as I'm concerned. And doctors don't really know what seems to cause it. There's a lot of theories about it, but basically it can affect different people in different ways. Sometimes it can mimic the symptoms of a bladder infection. Sometimes it can make you have a lot of pain. Sometimes it can just be a little bit annoying, and there's a wide range of symptoms, just put it that way. Anyway, so I suffered from interstitial cystitis. It started back when I was pregnant with Hayes. That is when I had my first symptoms of it, and it kind of manifested in that I just felt like I always had a really full bladder, and it kind of ached when I would pee and go to the bathroom, and I just kind of chalked it up to being pregnant with Hayes. Even though I'd been pregnant before and I hadn't experienced that, I chalked it up to just being pregnant and basically having like a fucking giant ass watermelon sitting on my bladder at all times. So I didn't really think much of it. And it was pretty soon after I gave birth that I started to have more severe symptoms, still kind of more of the same thing, but then it got into the region of being extremely painful. So I went to the doctor, thinking that I had some sort of terrible kidney infection or bladder infection, and there's no infection present. They're like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, bull fucking shit, there's something wrong with me. And it escalated from there. It got worse and worse, and sometimes it would come and go, and symptoms would increase during times of ovulation, times of stress, or times of or times when my immune system was struggling, like maybe I was fighting a cold or something like that. It got to the point where the pain was intolerable. And let me just, for a point of reference here, I have given birth naturally, okay? And I feel like I have a pretty high tolerance for pain. I'm not a fucking pussy, okay? But this pain was so bad. I mean, I would rather deep throat a hot curling iron than go through that shit again, because it was awful. It was to the point where I was screaming in pain, doubled over, couldn't speak, couldn't move. It was horrific. I was in the emergency room several times with it, and they did every test under the sun. They put the little camera up your urethra. Like they did everything and tried to give me, painkillers. Nothing works. No amount of painkillers, nothing works. And there was just no answers, right? So I kind of went on like this for a couple of years, where it would kind of come and go, and I would have bouts of it that were really terrible. And nobody ever had any answers. Very frustrating. If you've ever dealt with a chronic sort of condition where you can't really pinpoint what's wrong, I imagine people that suffer with autoimmune disorders, like, I have so much empathy for you. That it sounds awful. So it was really awful. And then when Hayes was around 3 years old, she began to suffer the same symptoms. It was just her saying that she felt like she had to go to the bathroom, but she didn't really have to go. And then there was times too when she was like keeled over in pain, and I've actually taken her to the emergency room. Obviously they tested her for any kind of infection. There was never any infection present. It was just really, really frustrating. I did all sorts of alternative sort of, healing things for it because the doctors weren't any help. I saw like functional medicine doctor. I did acupuncture. I saw this one guy that did sort of energetic healing, and he sort of prescribed me these whole food supplements. So they were, basically vitamin supplements, but they all came from Whole Foods. So they're really expensive, obviously. And so I started taking those, and that is the time where I actually did begin to feel some relief. Now, just a side note, at this time in my life, I was not vegan, but I was largely plant-based. It had been years since I had eaten any chicken or beef or anything like that. I was still eating fish here and there, and I was still eating eggs here and there, and a tiny little bit of dairy, not a lot of dairy. So, you know, by most people's standards, I had a pretty clean diet. So that's where I was at with that. And so I did start to feel relief with this guy. Hayes was sort of in and out of it. She would have long stretches where she wouldn't experience it. And then she would sort of have little bouts with it here and there. And we just kind of tried to manage it as they came up. So awful. The pain and misery that this condition sort of brought into my life was such a dark time, and it was really tough because I had two really little kids that, you know, that's stressful in and of itself. I was also in a relationship that was not healthy. That was really stressful. So there was a lot of things going on, and because of this pain, like I have to be honest with you, I would never kill myself, but I definitely had thoughts of like, I have to end this. This is just, I can't live like this. Yeah, that's how bad the pain was. It was really horrific. I have yet to talk to anyone that has had interstitial cystitis since that really experienced that level of pain. Anyway, flash forward a few years, I watched the documentary Forks Over Knives, and I begin to see that I don't need to be including fish and eggs and stuff in my diet. And pretty soon after that, I went plant-based, and then ultimately became vegan, and I was eating whole plant foods, and I never dealt with interstitial cystitis again. I had one bout with it when I moved from California to Florida, just I think because moving's a really intensely stressful thing. So I did deal with a bit of it then, but it wasn't anything like how it had been at its worst. So switching to a diet of whole plant foods is what I attribute my relief of symptoms to. And since then, I've been really good, but Hayes has continued to suffer. Specifically last summer, she was having a lot of trouble with it. It was pretty consistent. She was also having a lot of migraines last summer. And I don't mean to place the blame on any one particular thing, but I know the reason why. It's because her diet was shit last summer, because we were sharing a house with Dad, and Dad obviously has different eating styles that I do and that the kids do when they're with me, which is usually most of the time. So we spent 6 weeks with Dad, and she was eating a lot of junk food, a lot of fatty food, a lot of animal products, a lot of candy. And so she had it really bad. Even she had it so bad one night she was sleeping over at a friend's house. I had to drive there at 1 a.m. to go pick her up because she was so miserable and in pain. So it became pretty apparent to me that diet has a lot to do with this condition and managing it. But I still don't understand what it is from. I was very confused about that. And then one day I jumped on to Medical Mediums live on Instagram. And I don't know if you guys follow Medical Medium or if you think he's a bunch of bullshit. And I don't know, because I get it if you're not down with the Medical Medium, because he hears a voice of spirit, which tells him what's going on with people medically and whatever. But here's the thing with Medical Medium. His protocols, or what he's recommending, is really just more whole plant foods and really nutrient dense foods, and a low fat plant-based diet essentially is what he is recommending to people, which is a good thing, which alleviates symptoms. But I jumped on there and people were just asking him random questions. And so I asked him, what causes interstitial cystitis? And he said, interstitial cystitis, that is the streptococcus. And this bell went off in my head, and like, again, he may be full of shit. I don't know. You don't know. We don't fucking know if he hears a spirit or not. You don't know. You may doubt it. I may doubt it, but we don't know. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But he said strep, and a bell went off in my mind, because I began to have the symptoms of IC when I was pregnant with Hayes. And at that time, I was also diagnosed with group B strep, which is a kind of strep that women get oftentimes when they're pregnant, they have to do a test to see if the baby is born, because it's vaginally. You find that sort of bacteria vaginally. And it's not really harmful, but they do a test to see if you're positive for it. So I was positive for it. So I had it then, which is when I began the symptoms. And then I also probably passed it on to Hayes when she was born. And that just made a lot of sense to me when no one else in the history of my going to doctors and healers and all these different things and all this fucking multiple hours and hours and hours of research on the internet, no one has been able to give me any sort of reason for it. And this just clicked like ding. And so there, boom, I immediately began to, follow the protocol for getting rid of strep in your body. And I began to do the celery juice for Hayes and, just incorporate a few more things, try to limit her chocolate because that's something that's probably really bad for them. And I just started to include some of these healing foods for Hayes. And one of the things was celery juice. So she did celery juice every morning for quite a few months. She did not like it, but she did it. The symptoms of her interstitial cystitis went away as soon as we weren't cohabitating with Dad and we got into our own space or whatever. She would still have little tiny tinges of it here and there if she was sick or dealing with a stressful time or whatever it was. She would still feel it a little bit, but we knew what was causing it and we knew how to fix it. So we included some herbal supplements, and you guys can look into that. Look up the medical medium's protocol. I know he doesn't really like that word protocol, but whatever, it's a fucking protocol. So if you want to look into that and see what his protocol is for strep, you can check that out. And so we included some herbs, and I just started including some wild blueberries. She loves to eat just wild blueberries frozen. And yeah, so she really hasn't had any serious issues with it since. And I certainly have not either, because my diet is fucking... Anyway, I just feel like I had to get that off my chest. I should have made a video about this a long time ago, but it's only been recently that I've been getting questions about it. I guess because I mentioned that I had it in the past in a video I made, a few months ago. And so I'd been getting questions about it, and I've been getting questions about it on Instagram Live, and I had a few requests to make a video about it. So here it is. That was my experience with interstitial cystitis, and you can take it with a grain of salt, but if you're suffering, definitely look into the medical medium, and whether he's full of shit or not, following those things did help me, help my daughter. I had already sort of sorted myself out with the whole plant foods. Just really quick, I want to say that a couple of the things that medical medium says really feed that strep bacteria is eggs, which I was eating regularly, and chocolate, which chocolate for me is a no-go. I know a lot of people think it's like this superfood, but for me, and maybe it's because I had strep or whatever, but it feeds that bacteria supposedly, but chocolate for me is no bueno. It's definitely a trigger for IC, and I get skin rashes and itchy and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so there it is. There's the video. I'm pretty sure my kids are going to be walking out any second, so I'm going to hele on. Did I just say hele on? That's like a Hawaii thing. Is that a Hawaii thing? Hele. Yeah, that's definitely a Hawaii thing. Okay, scratch that. So I'm going to get up on out of here, and I will see you guys really soon. If you have any questions or comments or anything that's helped you with IC, leave it in the comments for other people to read, because that shit fucking sucks. And if you are suffering from it right now, my heart is with you, and don't feel disheartened, because there is a way out. You definitely can heal from this. It's not going to be with you for your entire life. You're gonna get over this. You're gonna get through it. I promise. Okay? I love you guys. Mwah.